Welcome to SureShade University, where today's video is going to be about the RTX, MTX actuators and replacing some components. Components right now are made currently out of glass-filled plastic, and they do tend to break and need to be replaced on a unfortunately regular basis. So we're currently in the process of coming out with some newer units. Right now for the MTX, we're using these CNC'd aluminum products, and we are going to wind up going to all of these components within these actuators and the MTX2 unit. So that'll stop that from happening. Those won't break. But we do want to go over a couple of the components where you can understand the assembly of the unit. There are port and starboard actuators on both the MTX and the RTX units. On these units, you can tell your thumb releases point inboard and your release holes here, they both face inboard. So as you're looking at it from there, this would be starboard and this would be port. So make sure that you understand that when you're working on either the RTX or the MTX2. Because when you disassemble them, all the parts are the same, but depending on how you put them together, depends on whether it's going to be a port or a starboard tube. Okay? Another thing I want to go over, please be sure, these come with tags on them when they're brand new, when you're working on them in the field. Of course, the tag's not there, it's been removed. Please do not remove these thumb release mechanisms here. This thumb screw here remains in here. The reason is there is a shuttle inside this tube that looks like this. Okay? This is where that thumb release goes into. On this end of it, there is a spring in here that rides in the first stage. When you release this thumb release mechanism, you take that out, this shuttle slides up and that spring drops out. Now the complaint's going to be that this stage will not release. Well, it won't release because this spring is now in the front of this and it's all smashed up. That's what happens when this gets removed. Okay, so please don't take those out. If you have to, make sure that you keep pressure. If you see I'm pushing on that shuttle and it's bouncing back because that spring is in place. If you push on this and it doesn't go back, you know the spring's been crushed, okay? If you need to take that out, just keep your finger pressed on it. It'll hold it in place. The other thing that I see people doing all the time is there is a 1032 by 3/8 screw that when you're done assembling everything, I've seen people take these and they will remove this thumb release mechanism, which again is a no-no, and then they will take this screw, and if you look here, that is the mounting hole. What's supposed to happen, if you want to zoom in, Joe, is you have to finagle this around a little bit until you see this thumb release mechanism, this hole, and then your outer crossbar that goes down in here. All three of those holes will line up, and then this screw goes in here. So it's going to fit right down in there. And then you tighten it all together and you'll know you're good when this thumb release mechanism still works up and down, okay? So that's how that goes in there. So when you have to disassemble this, you're just to remove that screw, slide the outer crossbar out, okay? Don't take the handle apart, okay? So let's dive into this. Set these components apart. 2 Allen wrenches is all you need to disassemble the unit. So what we'll do is we'll pick one of them and just start there, and I suggest that you guys, remove the other one from the table so that you don't confuse the parts. So the complaint usually is when the shade is extended, it either collapses on its own, or when they collapse the unit, there's a specific stage, let's say this one, that when they get to here, they bump the stage and this pin's not being pulled, so they have to take an Allen wrench and push it in to release it. Okay guys, do me a favor, don't take these and just start bashing them together, because you're gonna break the plastic triggers inside of them. Okay, so if you do this and you can't take that stage and it collapses, then it's got a locking problem. So let's just assume one of the stages needs to be replaced. Pick that stage. If it's this stage, start here. If it's this one, start here. They're each one taken apart separately, okay? So what we'll do is we'll start with the larger stage, just because. You remove the screw and the Delrin washer, okay? Then what you're gonna do is you're gonna pull this sleeve out, okay? And now you have to be careful because this trigger has a spring under it, just like that. So you wanna pull it, it's gonna lock into place. Take an Allen wrench, start to slide it out. It might get stuck in this hole too, but if you take your hand and cover it and pull it out, see, it got stuck, push it in. If you look right here, you can see that trigger, it's starting to come out. So you wanna cover it, and it's being held in by this stage, okay? So if I pull this stage out, you'll see how it'll release that pin, okay? So here is the trigger, and if you look, this is how it goes in, with the cupped end facing the inside of the actuator. So there's your trigger, and there's your spring, okay? This stage here is usually not the culprit of what breaks. It's all the ones that consecutive to it, okay? So there's no, as you can see, there's no trigger on this end because there's nothing in this tube to release it, okay? So we're gonna set that tube aside, and then we're going to disassemble the next section, okay? So what you wanna do is you just wanna make sure that this pin is not bent like this, because if you bash these together enough and hard enough, this will cup this trigger and it'll get stuck in there. Make sure that your springs are straight. Again, if the one that falls out of here gets stuck sideways, then you could smash that up. So just make sure all your parts are good before you try and put it back together. So we'll go to this next stage. And each stage pretty much comes apart identically. Same screws hold each section, they're not different lengths. So again, slide your collar forward. Okay, hold your trigger. So this is generally the culprit. What happens when you take this component, this trigger goes into this stage, okay? And I'll show that to you. If you look into this hole, you can see that trigger, and you'll see it, now it's not there, and now it's there. That trigger mechanism is what pulls this trigger down so that you can release the pin from the locking hole. So what happens is when this is broken off, of course it's not going to release the pin. That's why it gets stuck, okay? So here's where it's important to remember. Your trigger is going to match up with your holes in your tubes. So this cap is identical for port or starboard side. The only thing that makes it port or starboard is if you have the trigger up top when you're building this one, or you take the screws out, rotate this 180 degrees, and now this is on the bottom, it's now going to turn into a port side versus the starboard side, or vice versa. Okay? Easy enough. The other stages come apart the same. The only other stage that we can go to here, you can hear that lock into place. Okay, and then the last stage, please make sure that you keep all the Delrin washers, because if they do not get used, you'll bottom the screw out on the next stage. And that's what happens when you don't cover it. Okay? So again, you can see all these little caps have the triggers on them. So if you have a system that's not unlocking stage by stage, then this trigger is broken and you'll have to replace the cap. You can order the cap from us, okay? This stage I'm gonna leave together, but if you have to remove this stage to get to this unit inside because of its spring is not right, again, this is what it looks like inside. So taking it apart, it's not necessary. That's all that's inside here, okay? So if you take this thumb release out, this is going to slide out the front. You want to make sure you retrieve the spring, make sure it's not bent. When you put it back together, the best way to put it together is to take this, stand it up upright, hold it like this, then you're going to hold your tube and you're going to run this down, okay? Then you're going to stick your finger in here, run it up the rest of the way until you see how you can see the trigger in there? You want to make sure that you see that trigger go in and you feel the spring push it back out. Then you know you've got it in place. Then you put your thumb release mechanism on, put your thumb release screw in, and you can tell it holds it in place. Again, if you remove this and that shuttle's allowed to slide, that spring's going to fall out. Okay? So that's disassembly. Reassembly is just the reverse order of. Again, I'll show you the first stage. The rest of the stages are just identical. You make sure your spring is straight. You have a little recess down in here where you're going to drop the spring. Okay, you can see it's almost flush with the top. Make sure that your trigger is not bent. Again, the cup faces in. So you can do one of two things. You can push this down and hold it and feed it in, or you can take the next stage and engage it so that holds it in place. Then you want to line your track and your keyway up. Slide that in, and then you can let go of the trigger. Rotate to where your keyways are lined up. We'll go ahead and just reassemble the whole thing. They don't have to be super tight. They're not meant to be. Okay. Again, next stage. Drop the spring in, drop your trigger in, push it down, and then come to the next stage, push it in and hold it, and that'll hold the trigger down. Then you're going to come in, line your keyway up, slide it together. Okay. Next stage, same thing. And then your last stage. Push it down, lock it in place, line up your keyways. Okay, and then we're going to test it real quick. Pull out each stage. Make sure your pin locks into place. Pin locks into place. Pin, and then grab it. You should be able to do this and it not collapse. It's not meant to get beat on back and forth. It's just meant to lock into place. And again, to release, push your thumb release mechanism and then let go of it. And each stage, if you watch this pin, when this collapses, that trigger will poke that one and pull it down, and then it's allowed to slide in. Okay? That's it. It's the whole actuator disassembly and reassembly. If you have any questions, send us an email, service@sureshade.com, or give us a call. Thanks.